So the panel is on infrastructure. Supposedly, the most discussed thing, and then we already in the previous panel already started to, on these issues, the discussions, and that it went really hot already. Basically, the question is, do we need China's money and resources? What is the China's stake in the infrastructure in your particular cases, and critical infrastructure, and why we should be worried? And at the end, I would like really to move to the recommendations, to what we should do. I will be pushing on this question. And so let's start with the first one, about the stakes and about the issue, about the problem. Why should we should be worried? Didi.
Okay, thank you very much, Olevs. It wasn't exactly how I was expecting to start off, but I will do my best. I think, you know, when I look at the spread of infrastructure from China, almost always state-owned companies, into the world, really, Europe being just one example, and within Europe, Nordic, Baltic area, a subset example, if you like. Really what I see is an enormous need for infrastructure development. And I feel like we in Europe and people in the US have been, I don't know if negligent is the right word, but we have certainly been, I think, in some ways selfish, if you like. Again, maybe not quite the right word. We have been mostly focusing on ourselves and our markets, as Roger Robinson pointed out, which are enormous and very profitable for some people, and the wealth gap in our societies is growing, even as overall wealth rises over the long term. That's the case, which is a good thing. But I think that we have actually ignored a lot of infrastructure needs elsewhere. And China is, of course, as it does so well in many areas, being very commercially capable, a strong mercantile culture, is able to spot opportunity as something which is, if you like, almost like a distressed asset or a semi-distressed asset. This is a huge skill, and to just go in and to offer what is needed. And I mean, their infrastructure build is terrific. I've recently back from Israel, did a long story there looking at China's infrastructure build in Israel, American unhappiness with it, because Israel is a special friend of America. But I see sort of similar patterns definitely in Europe. At this point, some of you will know there are about 96 ports around the world that are owned and operated by PRC, state-owned companies, almost all of them state-owned companies. So there's a huge need. And of course, no one could even begin to argue that other countries that don't have these facilities, you know, don't have the water desalination plants, for example, that China is building in Israel, that no one would in their right mind would, you know, argue that they don't deserve them. Of course they do. So that's the first point that I think we really need to keep in mind, is there's no point going around telling people what they can't do. You need to also tell people what they can do and offer them really great alternatives. And until you do that, I feel we're on a bit of a negative road, if you like. And so that was just one point I wanted to make. On the issue of infrastructure, it is the most visible component, I think, of PRC reach into other countries, societies, cultures. Technology transfer, which is an issue that I've worked on a lot. We published a book about it, is less visible. Infrastructure is highly visible. When I look at the Nordic-Baltic region, which is where we focused on in this project, the two German states are very interesting. For one of them was in the former East Germany, the other was in the former West Germany, so Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, which was the home state of Angela Merkel. 8 elections in a row she won there, 30 years in parliament. And then the other one, of course, Schleswig-Holstein, which is off in the west. So these are two, their profiles are fairly different. But what I saw looking at these two, in fact, wasn't so much physical infrastructure build as what concerned me far more were the issues of research, education, and new economy, progressive economy, technology transfer through business, through research. There's an institute in one of these states where there are 95 researchers, young people from the PRC. In fact, there are so many that it's called colloquially the little PRC, as a kleine Volksrepublik, unofficially among research institute administrators. And these are often self-contained units of researchers. There'd be 6, 7, 8 in one, and then there may be a German person in the administration, but they are self-contained. And this knowledge is then transferred back to China. Either physically they go back, or they do what's called stay in place, serve the country from abroad while staying in place. That's a whole approved system by the PRC of technology transfer. They figured the whole thing out. So I think the other thing, and just to end some brief opening remarks, the other issue I would then point to is the sheer interconnectedness of things. So we're talking about infrastructure, and then I started talking about technology transfer, and then about business, and there's a reason for that, of course, because if you like, the what's holding all these things together here is the Communist Party and its way of being able to work very interchangeably, very holistically, if you like. Again, it's maybe not the exact quite word we want to use, but it's the interconnectedness of things. And when you are a one-party system, when you have that level of power and control, not all the time, but some of the time, when you want it, you can have it. If it's really important to you, you can make it happen. Yeah, so it's like you establish a platform and then you can put anything you like into that platform. That's how it works. It could then be a business deal, it could be an investment, it could be a technology cooperation, it could be a research cooperation, it could be an infrastructure build, it could be a train line. And this type of thinking, is very powerful, it's very effective, and I think it's extremely, and it's not just thinking, it's acting. Is extremely difficult for us to deal with because we come from much more compartmentalized societies. Everyone in this room knows that there may be something important to do, but the law of your land maybe won't let you do it. It won't let you pay attention to this problem or deal with that problem because there are restrictions and protections. That's simply not the case in China. And that's now legally very clear that the party wants this interconnecting, encompassing system to continue going forward. I think that gives it extraordinary strength. So there are individual examples, but I'll stop here and let others have a say.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I'm not sure. The question was, why should we be worried about these infrastructural investments?
China's stake in the infrastructure in the case of Finland.
Mm-hmm.
Why we should be worried.
Right. Well, yeah, there are these few kind of huge projects or investments projects in Finland in which China has a stake, or I should rather say investment plans, because so far nothing has realized. I mean, they haven't been going on they have been in the talks for I don't know, 5 or 10 years or so, but so far nothing has been built, so nothing visible in there. And secondly, not all these, or most of these Chinese infrastructural investments in Finland, or the plans to invest in Finland, they are not exactly initiated by the Chinese, but most of them are initiated by the Finnish companies, state-owned companies, or individual businessmen, and they have then incorporated the Chinese companies and funds into the picture. So most of them are not initiated by China initially, but China has been kind of pulled in. Some of them are, but most of them are not. Yeah, broadly, if we look at the major infrastructural investments in Finland, we could, or again, the plans of, there's nothing nothing built, not a single building, at least to my knowledge. But we could categorize them into two broad categories. Like, first of all, there are infrastructural projects that have to do with Arctic connectivity. So let's say like railroads, plans of railroads, stuff like that, transportation in the Arctic region. And the second major group is planned investments into biotechnologies, refineries and stuff like that. So if you go through first the Arctic connectivity projects, perhaps the most spectacular of them, which some of you might already have heard of, is of course the planned Helsinki-Tallinn tunnel, which there was a plan to build an actual tunnel from Helsinki to Tallinn, a 100-kilometer long tunnel, which would have costed $15 billion. Most of the funding would have been coming, not actually most of it, let's say 1/3 or something like that. But a huge part of the funding would have in this plan would have come from a Chinese company called the Touchstone Capital, and the tunnel would have been built by Chinese railroads, state-owned railroad companies. And this then, the Helsinki-Tallinn tunnel is connected to another huge plan of an infrastructure, the Arctic Corridor, which is a planned railroad from Rovaniemi, northern Finland to Narvik in Norway, which would then connect. The plan is that from Narvik you would have a straight railroad down to Helsinki, and from Helsinki through the tunnel to the rest of Europe. And in the minds of the Chinese investors, I guess this would then make some kind of a terminus for the Arctic Silk Road, which would go through the northeastern route. But yeah, those are the huge, the Arctic Corridor and the Helsinki-Tallinn tunnel, those are the major projects that are still in the plans, I guess, but the future does not look very bright for them. Then there was the planned Arctic cable, a fiber optic cable from Finland to, I guess, Japan, but also China, called Arctic Connect. In the original plan, the Russian company Megafon was involved, and Huawei Marine was involved. Nothing happened in there either. And then I guess the fourth most important infrastructural investment in the Arctic region was an attempt by, I don't remember exactly, it was probably the Polar Research Institute of China. They tried to buy an airport near Sodankylä, no, Kemijärvi city in the northern Finland, Lapland, in 2018 for scientific purposes, and it was also cancelled soon after. Okay, those are the Arctic projects. Then we had the projects in the domain of bioeconomy, because as you know, forest industry is one of the major Finnish industries, and pulp and wood products and stuff like that, they are one of the major exports from Finland to China also. So China has been interested in investing into at least 4 kind of a huge refineries and factories. In Kemi there was the Sunshine Kaidi proposal for a biofuel refinery. In Kemijärvi again there was a proposal for another biorefinery, and in Paltamo and in Kuopio, these 4 huge plants. Each one of them would have been costing around 900 to 1 billion euros, but like I said, nothing has materialized in those investments either. So yeah, I'm gonna end here and just emphasize the point that we have these massive plans, tens of billions in total probably, but the tunnel is cancelled, the Arctic Corridor is cancelled, the Arctic Connect, the fiber optic cable it's not actually dead, but it's changed its routes towards the west into the US, and through that the Northwestern Passage to Asia. And the biorefineries, none of them is currently moving forward. So a lot of talk, less walking the walk, I guess.
Thank you. My article is about China in Greenland, and which I have been written with Professor Søren Dosenrode. What is remarkable in China's presence in Greenland is that back in year of 2018, the Chinese company bid to the pre-qualification to build and expand 3 new Greenlandic airports in Nuuk, Qaqortoq, and Ilulissat to the government-owned company Galassit Airports. And the government-owned Greenlandic company Galassit Airports encouraged the Chinese investments, which raised some concerns from US and Denmark because of the security implications. So that made some issues and tensions between Greenland and Denmark about foreign investment, due to Denmark still has the jurisdiction and about foreign and security policy in Greenland. So what also remarkable is that in the year of 2016, when the Danish government tried to sell out the old buildings from an old military base in South Greenland, a Chinese company called General Nice bid to buy all the buildings in that purpose to have a military presence in Greenland. So that was stopped immediately. And the other thing we can mention is that China have had some interest to invest in Greenlandic mining project. One of the biggest are the Citronen Fjord in North Greenland, in the top of North Greenland, and the iron ore in Nuuk, Isua, and Guannersuit in South Greenland, which has rare earth and the byproduct of uranium in that. But also to remember, those mining projects are changing all the time, and the ownerships are changing. So Glenn Grant, Mr. Glenn Grant, will express it that the world is changing, but the company ownerships are also changing in Greenland. So there might have been some change since I wrote this article. But what is also remarkable is that the government of Greenland has recently opened a representation office in Beijing to deepen the relation between Greenland and China. So those are what I can say was remarkable footprints from China in Greenland.
Hello, so thank you for having me today. I will start from a bit different angle and try to answer one of Olevs' questions about why should we be afraid of Chinese investments. So first thing we have to keep in mind is that the Chinese Communist Party is a Marxist-Leninist party. And Marxist-Leninist parties are all about control. And what was already mentioned, I'm not sure by Didi or by Matti, that China has investments in some nearly 100 seaports across the world. So it is helping Chinese Communist Party to control trade of China and trade with China. In Central and Eastern Europe, we know what the rule of Communist Party means, and it maybe make easier for Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia to deal with this challenge, what I will now try to prove. First, the first Chinese investment in critical infrastructure in Poland was long before the Belt and Road Initiative. It was 2005, when Hutchinson bought part of port in Gdynia. But what is here very important, it was not directly Hutchinson. This company did this via one of its subsidiaries registered in Luxembourg. Right now, Hutchinson wants to deal with one of other wharves in port of Gdynia that is part of NATO infrastructure, but this competition will be finished in May next year. And honestly speaking, they have very low chances of success. Why? In 2015, yes, already in 2015, Polish government introduced new rules of screening of foreign investments that are much harsher than what the European Union advises. Yes, Hutchinson and other China-based or China-connected companies can try to win this competition for wharf in Gdynia, but honestly speaking, they have very low chances. Also on security grounds, Polish Defense Ministry in 2016 blocked Chinese investment in railway hub in the city of Lodz in central Poland. The biggest mistake with Polish side made then, it was information politics, because it was first, okay, China wants to invest in railway in Lodz, and without explaining anything, Defense Ministry blocked it. So it started sometimes really crazy theories, which were fueled by the personality of the then Defense Minister Antoni Macierewicz, who has opinion that not so mentally balanced person, politely speaking. But recently, sometimes later, it was proved that the reasons for blocking were very good. So, Chinese company wanted to buy former military ground, neighboring with actual military grounds, and in this new property, do anything they want without control from the Polish side. So it is clear as the sun, it should be blocked. But Chinese companies don't give up. And we have other very interesting cases showing how the CCP is all about control. When all attempts to buy some elements of Polish critical infrastructure failed, then one of Chinese wealthy funds tried to buy Polish security company providing security to many critical infrastructure objects and military objects. It was also blocked, and so finally this security company was sold to a French bidder. But after these few examples, we see what we have to deal with, and I think it's a good, I'm running out of time, so it is a good moment to finish.
Thanks for all your excellent answers. Which was striking me since the beginning of the conference was the question which was asked by Glenn Grant. And the question was basically of the issue, do we really need China's money and resources at our end for the things what we really want for ourselves, which is critical for us. And do we really need Chinese money? And it is what Didi was saying, in my understanding, is that probably China is making us to believe that we need them. So they are kind of sneaking in with their different projects, and at the end, it makes us to believe that we can't go without this. Like they put us on that addiction kind of thing, and then in Finland, here we see that the business is driving basically these developments, and in Greenland it's very interesting. Greenland said no to Chinese money, but at the same time we see there are other interesting developments happening. So the question is that do we need this China's money and resources indeed, and what is there for us to be done in terms of recommendations, maybe, or ideas, how we could nationally and jointly, and not to forgetting about American partners, to overcome these issues. If we really are starting to comprehend that these are the problems, so how it's difficult. Alexandra was saying in the previous panel that it's very difficult. It's hardly possible. So the question on China's money and resources and how we can get rid of this.
Well, I think that we need to be far more vigilant about what is happening amongst us, because the fact is we still are not. I think that, there's the example, I didn't get into specifics about the northern German situation, but in the book then, I look at a little bit at the port of Hamburg and the port of Wilhelmshaven, and of course in Hamburg, Costco is going for a 35% purchase of one terminal, the Tollerort terminal. And in Wilhelmshaven, a Chinese state-owned company has got a 99-year lease for part of a logistics park, which is part of a huge, beautiful new port. I've been there and I looked at it. It's a fantastic place. Wilhelmshaven to me is a rough diamond. It's Hartz IV territory. It's not very prosperous and is constantly fighting with Bremen. So Wilhelmshaven is Niedersachsen, is Lower Saxony, Bremen is Bremen, and then Hamburg's competing against everywhere else. And basically you have these three centers, they all have ports, and they're all fighting each other. And it's, in some ways, completely self-defeating behavior. Perfect territory for a very intelligent approach to gain critical infrastructure, which is exactly what's happening. And the fact that Wilhelmshaven port is about 3 miles, so less than 5 kilometers away from the biggest naval base in Germany, at Heppense-Groden, which is in itself inside the biggest single military area in Germany, with the Luftwaffe as well as the Marine and land forces, has so far gained practically no traction in the German government, because the German government doesn't particularly listen to the military. That's the tradition here, post-war. So I guess, I think when you look at these things, when you do look at the specific infrastructure issues that are going on, in theory, these need to be approved by the Ministry of, the BMWK, the Ministry of Economy, Energy and Climate, I think. They don't want to make these decisions. What they need to do, of course, is to make decisions on national security grounds in terms of critical infrastructure. They need to do the same with emerging technology. They need to do the same with high tech, with deep tech. In fact, the new German export laws, export screening, in fact, places an even higher threshold for investment on future technologies such as AI, various computing issues, than on ordinary investments like cars, meaning that if you are in the business of doing quantum or AI, high tech, you are less likely to be screened by the government than if you are, you know, Mercedes or something like that doing cars. Because they say, the business lobby won that one, they say this is our future economy, we can't prohibit investment from China into our future economy, it's not good for our business. Now, I mean, these are just things that are just so kind of hard to understand if you have any interest in you know, security issues, or if you have any interest in deepening the defensive attitude, if you like, toward a lot of China's very targeted actions. And here I completely agree with Pawel. I mean, you're talking about a control-focused system, that's very obvious, and a system interested in spreading, in controlling not just at home, but controlling overseas as well in order to be able to control at home. Yeah, and then it all becomes part of one system, and I think that's what we're targeted with. So I just think that if I had to come up with a sort of a little conclusion to all of this, I would say that we need to engage, we need to start engaging in something which is a form of very careful coexistence. Perhaps sort of extreme caution, if you like. I mean, obviously China's not going away. China will always be there in some way, shape, or form. What will it be? We don't know. That's unclear as well. I think there's certainly a lot of tensions, but extremely careful coexistence. And then I think a new relationship can develop between Europe and China, for example, one that's based on more mutual respect. Because frankly, right now, I don't think that China does particularly respect Europe. And I don't really blame them, because we're really woolly, yeah?
Yeah, well, the funny thing about some of these projects that I discussed, for example, the Helsinki-Tallinn tunnel or the Arctic corridor or the railroad, these are not exactly projects that we need. So there's no actual need for these projects. So there's no even actual need for Chinese money in these projects. I mean, there have been studies. Many studies on, for example, the Arctic corridor, and they have, the judgment has been that it's just not economically, how do you say it? Viable, right. And the Helsinki-Tallinn tunnel, I don't know. I mean, of course, it would be awesome and cool probably to take a train to Tallinn and be there in half an hour, but so far we have been able to live without, and so it's not really something that we need for, and probably for those reasons both those projects have already failed. Then the Arctic Connect, the fiber optic cable from Finland to China, I don't think it was about Chinese money. It was about building this cable with the help of Huawei Marine and Russian company Megaphone. Can you imagine nowadays that you would actually, we actually had a plan about building a fiber optic cable through Russian territorial waters, which would be operated and built by Huawei and Megaphone. Yes. Yeah, so it's been cancelled. But then if we look at the investments or the proposed investments in bioeconomy, these refineries, and this is something that we have been talking about throughout the day. That are we supposed to see all Chinese money as somehow evil? We should just not let it come into our countries, or can we choose certain sectors? Like, okay, let's not build strategically important railroads with Chinese money or fiber optic cables, but how about renewable refineries and stuff like that. So I'm not sure how we balance between such economic interests and Chinese influence. I don't have any good answer for this.
In my article, I have a very careful conclusion that there are two very different interpretations of if Greenland or Denmark needs some Chinese investment and Chinese money. In Greenlandic point of view, and what we have seen in the previous governments, that Greenland are more open for free trade between countries and more openly all for China than Denmark is. Denmark has a defense agreement with US about defense of Greenland, but also due to the Monroe Doctrine, US still has a sphere of interest in Greenland and to build and have military control over the geographical area. It made it difficult to Greenland to perform this free trade dream to attract some foreign investment in Greenland. So it's difficult. So there are two different answers to that. The Greenlandic answer and the Danish answer are different.
Okay, so in my opinion, the situation in the eastern part of region that interests us, and let's say generally Central and Eastern Europe, this 16+1 group is a bit different because during the last few years, China by itself has undone most of influence it gained during the previous year. So even in Poland, in Polish expert bubble, there is a discussion if we really can talk about the Chinese influence in our region, or rather we should talk about impact. Yes, at the very beginning of the Belt and Road Initiative, there were high hopes, not only in Poland, but I think also in Czechia, Romania, other Baltic states, that Chinese project would help to address some infrastructure issues that were not addressed enough by the European Union programs. And it proves to be false. China did not anything like that. What was even more complicated, Chinese companies tried to use in EU countries methods of doing business they knew from Southeast Asia or from Africa. And it would be not any surprise to tell that it failed miserably. Later, in this Chinese partnership with Russia, it was another cold shower for the region, and stranging the countries, Central and Eastern European countries from China, which is the best example is Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia going out from the 16+1 group. But the Chinese seems to be genuinely unable to understand that if you are all buddies with Russia, you can't build stable and friendly relations with countries from the former post-Soviet zone. And we were witness to that in the spring this year when China sent, I call this diplomatic rescue mission, to rescue relations with Central and Eastern European countries after Russian invasion of Ukraine, and honestly speaking, this mission was a failure. In Poland, even foreign ministry did not meet with Chinese envoys. They refused. And in other countries, the situation was very similar. If there were meetings, they were at the very low level. Trying to answer the question, so what we can do, what we should do about the Chinese investment and doing business with China, I think there is quite fresh, maybe last year, report by Merix, where this very good German think tank simply pointed out the sectors of economy that are dangerous, where you should be cautious, and where you just can do business with China. So I think we should pay more attention to this report.
Thanks for advice. Wish the life would be so simple, but we can move to the questions from the audience. Please.
Hello, my name is Travis Andrews. I'm with Kirsten Becker from the Bush School and interning with Otto and Olevs. But I want to have a question about Ukraine. So Russia's development, or China's development model, is based on high modernism. Therefore, they, develop huge infrastructure projects through their own resources, supplies, their own manpower, and then they, like as you said earlier, they own those ports. So when the war is over and we're rebuilding Ukraine, how imperative is it that the West beats China and develops their own package to rebuild the infrastructure inside of Ukraine? Because if we have high modernist infrastructure built by China in Ukraine, there won't be any sustainability to it because it will be built by the Chinese and not have any ownership or institutionalism by the Ukrainians.
This is a question for Didi? Sorry.
I can give an answer. I mean, if you want my personal opinion on that, I mean, and not just my personal opinion, but I think it's absolutely imperative that when this war, this awful thing, is over, that the EU and the US move in really fast and offer that which Ukraine needs. I think it's absolutely crucial, because otherwise I can see, you would essentially have a networked infrastructure, technology, interconnectivity kind of, location with deep PRC involvement in Europe. And I think that that's a really a game-changing proposition.
So I think that after the war, Ukraine would be not in a situation to be picky. And everything depends from the quality of offers. So it was exactly what Didi say, that the US and European countries would have to act fast, swiftly, and present a really good offer. But it is also a question of Ukrainian evaluation of propositions, because let's say right now the results of Chinese infrastructure projects in Balkans are not very encouraging to let China, let's say, rebuild infrastructure in Ukraine. We saw this highway in Montenegro, which ended in a debt trap, so the so-called debt trap, or the famous fast railway Belgrade-Budapest, which should be finished a few years ago, but trains between these two cities still, the journey takes much more time than it was under Austria-Hungary. Moreover, more than over 100 years ago.
I agree with you, Pawel, but I think that these infrastructure builds can be very good in some places. If you look at Haifa port, you know, that there are, I'm not sure what were the particular reasons for those examples, and I think Hambantota in Sri Lanka is also a politically quite troubled country. So I think it does depend on the region.
I think we can find two answers. First is what importance Beijing gives to each project. So in my opinion, it seems right now that Haifa is much more important than railway Belgrade-Budapest. And we can also say some good things about Chinese investment in Piraeus in Greece. Port is working and very effective. So we can also say that Chinese are much better in building ports than building railways. And the second answer, it is also about corruption. So in Israel, I think there is a low level of corruption. I would have to check this in these yearly corruption level reports. Contrary to Serbia and currently Hungary. And let's be honest, in terms of corruption, Ukraine is also a very good hunting ground for Chinese investment.
Thank you for your many good comments and remarks up there. First, two comments. First, to the latter one about Piraeus. Yes, and do remember that a year after China had taken over Piraeus, they alone blocked the EU united approach towards China when it came to human rights. So there is a one-to-one infrastructure investment, political power. Good. But my main comment that was for Mrs. Tatlow. I found it was very interesting when you said we had to take care and look at investments. I mean, I find it horrible what you told about China basically shopping into major military areas of Germany. But I mean, that will also imply if one really has to take care that one will have to dismantle parts of our open global economy. Mm-hmm. And that would then imply that also that if we want to have an open liberal economy, which is extremely important for our wealth, then we would have to kind of have our own little European open economy and with borders. And you can say, oh my God, that is some kind of neo-mercantilism. Answer, yes, but we already see it in the US and we see it in China. So that would mean Europe simply following suit. That would, of course, globally mean a lesser wealth. It would cost something, but might give us security. And again, that would mean Europe must unite. Perhaps provocative, but that's at least food for thought.
I just want to add a short comment regarding the Ukraine case. I can remind you one thing, that the war hasn't started this year. It started in 2014. So, and actually at the European level, there were already discussions before the second phase of the war started. And there was even an initiative called New Marshall Plan for Ukraine, which was discussed even in G7 Summit 2018. So the structure is already here. So I think countries are already thinking about that. So, and the initial structure is there. So after that, they have to revise it a little bit and has to work. Yeah. So just a short comment.
With all the respect to the panelists, thank you so much for your input in this discussion, your thoughts, and the debate. However, let's keep this discussion open until these challenges will be resolved. And at this point, I would say thanks to the panelists at this table. Thanks to everyone coming and be present with us all the day. I hope you find this at least interesting. But I really believe also quite rewarding, and we will be very pleased to share with you the final publication of all this project, which we expect to come by the end of September. We have all your contacts. We will send you this final publication electronically as soon as it will be available. This will be a book published by the Jamestown Foundation. So thanks once again.